Okay, everybody, can you please take your seats for the next session? Sorry to rudely interrupt your coffee break, but please take your seats and we'll get started. Kim. Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Going to continue with the show. Fantastic sessions there earlier. We're going to continue with a couple other great sessions, starting with this session, which is the critical perspectives of ocean floor mapping and ocean floor exploration. And you may have noticed in the original program that it was entitled The Criticality of Ocean Floor Mapping. Our team probably recognized rightly that most of the people at this symposium were aware of the criticality of ocean floor exploration and ocean mapping. And given the perspectives that they're going to be sharing today, we thought it was more appropriate to name the session the critical perspectives in ocean floor exploration. And we'll be looking at some of the key levers in ocean floor exploration from unique, diverse, and critical perspectives. The session brings together some fantastic panelists who will share their critical perspectives on ocean floor exploration. All of our panelists are very active in this space, but looking at the opportunities and challenges from completely different lenses. We'll hear perspectives from a legendary and very special ocean advocate, an NGO, student and innovator and entrepreneur, recent graduate and member of the Seabed 2030 organization, a DE&I champion from industry, and an industry thought leader on training and workforce development considerations as a result of technology evolution. So the diversity and the relevance of critical perspectives offered in this session is fabulous, and I can't wait to hear from our panelists. The full biographies can be seen online, but I'll introduce briefly our panelists here now. So we're very honored to have Fabien Cousteau with us in this session. Fabien is an aquanaut, oceanographic explorer, environmental advocate, documentary filmmaker, founder of the Fabien Cousteau Ocean Learning Center, and most recently the founder of the Proteus Ocean Group, which plans to build Proteus, the world's most advanced underwater research station. Arian Shaw is an undergraduate student at Imperial College of London who is a dedicated advocate for ocean technology, has done a TEDx talk on why ocean exploration is so important, and has co-founded a startup that is building hydrogen-powered AUVs. Sarah Cardegas works with Seabed 2030 as a data processor in the Arctic and North Pacific Ocean Regional Center, hosted at UNH CCOM, and most recently, in April 2023, took part in a month-long hydrographic survey in Galapagos Islands on board an Ecuadorian Navy hydrographic vessel, and she is a JEBCO alumni from the training program. Helen Stewart is a hydrographic surveyor or hydrographer at Fugro, a colleague of mine, who has pioneered numerous novel hydrographic applications in our organization. Most recently, Helen has been a vocal advocate for DE&I and has been working with the IHO's Empowering Women in Hydrography project, which is an officially endorsed program of the United Nations Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development. And Colleen Peters has spent most of her professional career at sea with a focus on ocean mapping. She's a breadth of experience acquiring and managing data. She has a business and technical background and is looking how we can incorporate remote operations into mainstream workflow, including the remote development of workforce in parallel with evolving technology. So, as you can sense, pretty interesting confluence of perspectives on ocean mapping, ocean exploration. With that, I will turn the podium over to Fabien. Thank you very much.
Voyons ce qui se passe là. Ok, voilà. Messieurs, mesdames, bonjour. Ladies and gentlemen, hello. Wow. This has been an intense day so far. Thank you, Map the Gaps, JEBCO, IHO, all of you for going through this journey today. This place is a special place for me, as you can imagine, because when I was a child, I used to run through the annals behind the scenes of all the little hallways and having lunch on the roof with my grandmother. And so I have a lot of fond memories here, a lot of emotion, and so it's such a privilege to be up here addressing all of you today, all you fish lovers. So, as an aquanaut and third-generation ocean explorer, it's important that the philosophy of this is also about being a voice for the ocean. I feel a little bit like a fish out of water with this group, to be quite honest, because most of you see the ocean from the top down and you're mapping the ocean world. I really more observe it from the bottom up. And so I'm going to take you on a journey, more of a tangential perspective than what's been the journey of us today. This angle is maybe more as an ocean explorer and one of a curious child in an adult's body. What you're doing is extraordinarily important, and you lay really the baseline for what some of us out there are doing on a day-to-day basis. Scientific understanding of our ocean and the ecosystems are vital to tackling the challenges that we face today. Something that isn't necessarily what we would talk about normally in a conference like this. But I really have to emphasize something. When we go into conferences, generally speaking, it's in very monocular fashion. And when we talk about ocean mapping, which is extraordinarily important, it's also very much on a two-dimensional level. A lot of what I do has to do with relaying all the different layers of data, all the different layers of knowledge, and all the different layers of curiosity. Imagine, for example, the Waze app and laying down the GPS map. It would be of very simple use if you don't have crowdsourcing to put in all the various data on top of which, all the various layers of information, whether it be to go to a gas station or to a point of interest or what have you. And that's really what I see as the partnership between what's happening today at this conference and what's happening in other departments of oceanic exploration. We know the ocean plays an essential role in regulating the planet's climate, biodiversity, and providing human resources for societies around the world. However, the ocean's vast and complex ecosystems are facing numerous challenges: pollution, overfishing, climate change, and habitat destruction. And that's where mapping the seabed is one of those fundamentals that we need to be able to count on to be able to populate that map with all the other layers. We need to innovate approaches by conservation, by using science, by using technologies, so that we can better address the challenges that we're facing. Now, a few years ago, I had the chance to lead a very unique mission called Mission 31. Suffices to say that I took 6 of us to live in the last remaining undersea marine laboratory called Aquarius, a glorious internal square meters, about 40 square meters, where the 6 of us spent 31 days. But the idea of living in saturation as aquanauts was not to live inside the habitat, but the ability to leverage the coefficiency of time to go out into the water column, to do the kinds of science you simply can't do from any other tool. And I'm happy to say that the 2 hypotheses that we had was, 1, do people still care about the ocean if you can connect them on a storytelling level? And 2, what kinds of science can we do if we live and work at the final frontier for extended periods of time? And within that 31 days, that full lunar cycle, we were able to do over 3 years worth of scientific research that touches upon everything from hydrocarbon pollution to cold water upwellings to predator-prey behavior and so on and so forth. We were also able to map in great detail that particular ecosystem and take DNA samples to send to the Ocean Genomic Project. The other aspect is, because it was such a unique project, the world paid attention, and we garnered over 34 billion unique media impressions, despite the fact of not having a organized PR campaign. And that leads to a highlight of something extraordinarily important for us studying the ocean. We have a challenge. We have a great challenge, not only in finding the right funding and enough funding to do all the kinds of research and data collecting and mapping that we need to do for the ocean, but also being able to translate that to the vast populace out there who would otherwise support us if they were connected with that ocean. Okay, there we go. Marine conservation and technologies aiding in creation of management and marine protected areas, GIS, and remote sensing helps us identify places of high ecological significance and enables our communities and policymakers to establish effective conservation zones and marine reserves. I remember our Dr. Sylvia Earle, one of our friends, family friends, talks about hope spots. But if we're to be able to really identify the best places for hope spots, we need to have that mapping data. And in some cases, have high resolution mapping data, which I know is a consideration within policy issues. But innovations within the robotics field and artificial intelligence enable us to really research and explore those areas in ways that previously were impossible, even at great depths, as with what Victor's doing. I'm having a hard time keeping up here. There we go. The digital ocean ecosystem of the future will rely on a network of underwater vehicles, sensors, and communication systems, along with surface vessels and satellite systems. There's a wide range of benefits for this, of course, which maybe not be appropriate for this particular conference, but suffices to say that the ocean is a very complex environment. Okay, there we go. An example, of course, is robotics to analyze and interpret data on the microcosmic level. And we haven't even yet thought of a lot of the technologies that we need to implement for tomorrow's research. AUVs and remotely operated vehicles are fantastic for a given purpose, as are a lot of other tools that we've talked about earlier today. But the gain in robotic intelligence, as much as it's undoubtedly leading to more ocean monitoring and sampling, particularly in areas that are either too big or too dangerous or too remote to reach, is just one aspect. And I urge everyone to think about not only the macrocosmic but the microcosmic when we're talking about ocean exploration. Now, one of the things that, of course, pops up on everyone's radar these days is AI, artificial intelligence, and that's, of course, being increasingly applied to various aspects, including ocean exploration and conservation efforts. Coral reefs ecosystems are very large and complex cities underwater, for example. Imagine, for example, you're a fish seeing a scuba diver come down, a big, strange, ugly, bubbling creature coming to invade your space. For me, being able to live and work underwater for extended periods of time, you shed that alienation. And the longer you stay in that undersea world, the more closely you can get to the subjects that you're trying to study. But how do you know what target areas are most important to study in the limited time that we have to combat some of the issues that I mentioned earlier? Coral reef monitoring, of course, is extraordinarily important, and analyzing that imagery with data from drones and underwater cameras, as well, of course, as other layers and bathymetry and so on and so forth, really give us a much better assessment of the coral reef shift and the health of its ecosystem. You know, bleaching and disease and growth patterns, all these things are extraordinarily important. We really don't have a finger on the pulse of the oceanic health. Now, sensor technologies should also be thought of as being an enhancement to all the efforts that are happening here. Whether it's to speed of direction of currents or changes in seawater chemistry or carbonic cycles, biological productivity in the deep sea, all these things are additional layers to the maps that we seek to have by 2030 and beyond. There are a lot of institutions gathering data out there, but unfortunately, as we've all seen, it's extraordinarily difficult to get everyone to share things in an equitable manner and one that is of symbiotic nature. There's a lot of data out there that we've replicated, both in marine biology and mapping, and sharing this data, engaging the public, is absolutely essential if we're going to get anywhere. The general public needs to be part of the solution. We talked about this a little bit yesterday, and I'll get into that in a couple of minutes, but if we are just going to be talking to ourselves within the inner circle, we are missing on a vast opportunity. The public is part of the solution. Without it, we won't get anywhere. Now, at the Ocean Learning Center, it's really important for us to have that human-ocean connection. And with regard to Mission 31, for example, we were able to reach over 100,000 students live from the bottom of the sea by augmenting the communication system from that antiquated habitat. And once you see that connection through the eyes of a child or even an adult, from underneath the blue whale in New York City to a group that was visiting the Arctic Circle, you understand how important it is to be a good storyteller. We had technologies that we brought down with us, prototypes from the Edgertronic camera to the Muse headset, which now have sensors that are incorporated in our Apple Watches and such, that give us better data on our circadian rhythms and so on and so forth, which are extraordinarily important for extreme environments, of course, for underwater exploration, great anecdotes for space exploration, but also apply quite literally to our everyday lives. But in order for us to be able to really leverage those abilities and those advances, we need to be able to get the next generation to dream about being ocean explorers, whether they become it or not. The ocean needs to become their background. And that's where Proteus comes in. Now, Proteus is probably the most ambitious endeavor to date, quite literally building what I would call the International Space Station of the Ocean. And that's really to offer the most advanced underwater research station in the final frontier of our planet, to be able to do mid and long-term research, to be able to cater to a tenant model, to shepherd upcoming scientists or biochemists or hydrologists, to be able to look at the ocean in a very different way and to be able to tell that story, to be able to offer a platform that simply hasn't been offered before. It's the missing tool in the toolbox of ocean exploration. And we cannot do that without being able to map the bottom of the sea in ways that give us the ability to do those engineering studies and the environmental impact studies. Now, imagine, for example, deploying people in an underwater city, not for days or even a few weeks, but months and possibly longer. Having the payload model and the tenant model that we are very used to in hospitality today on land, as well as looking forward to space colonization. All these exercises leverage the ability to bring in attention, bring in funding, and bring in a consciousness of our life support system, the ocean. We couldn't do it without mapping. Our favorite jurisdiction, Curacao, which is the first of these underwater villages, was so excited that, if you know Greek mythology, Proteus is the eldest son of Poseidon, the keeper of knowledge and the shepherd of the sea. It was supposed to be in Greece. I apologize for the Greeks in the audience. Curacao was so excited that within 2 weeks, even though we were having a discussion with the Greek government, they snagged it as a favored jurisdiction. And it was very exciting to all of us for many reasons. One of them is because Curacao has been vastly underexplored. Shocking considering it's a very popular destination for tourism. But what we found through our partnerships with NGOs like Carmabi and, of course, the local government is that Curacao is one of the last 2 remaining accruing coral reefs in the entire Caribbean. It hasn't been mapped, or at the very least, when we reached out to the Dutch Navy, we weren't able to gather those maps that supposedly, metaphorically, they had. So unfortunately, we had to redo something that was probably already done before. But luckily, because as a private social good enterprise, we stepped in and brought in our friends at Map the Gaps and R2 Sonic, we were able to offer the local government and the people of Curacao, as well as Carmabi, a value of $300,000 worth of mapping in great detail from 1 centimeter resolution to about 1 meter resolution at 200 meters. In one of their most sensitive ecosystems, and of course, a place that will be based out of for the first of these underwater habitats. Now, for us, having that map is a good baseline. And overlying that multi-beam sonar-derived map, along with handheld diver sonar and photomosaics into the mesophotic zone, will give us a really good sense of a 3D map down to the microcosmic, so that we can really look at the dynamics. And based on last night's discussions, which a few of us were privy to, there are 2 fundamental mapping needs with very different approaches. There's the detailed nearshore mapping, which I just talked about a little bit, and what we participated in, even though we're more the consumers than anything else. And the more macrocosmic, which are fulfilling the goals of the 2030 goalpost. And those bring in 2 very different sets of criteria. On the nearshore side, I think the best approach is to hit that crowdsourcing. On the deeper water, as Victor and others have mentioned, it's more in the hands of those who can either afford to or have to do it with larger ships and much more advanced equipment. And those many layers give us a better picture of the ocean's circulatory system, if you will. Having an accurate benthic map that has those overlays of temperature, salinity, pH, hydrocarbon, microplastics, biomass concentrations, acoustics, will give us crucial data for both predicting oceanic health and proactive in those decision-making processes. And it is crucial that our endeavors do not forget the big picture and the ultimate goal, which goes way beyond these walls. Now, with that said, I'm a big proponent of moving pictures, and I'd like to share with you a very short video of what I'm talking about. What if we built the International Space Station of the Sea and we're able to offer it to science, to education, and to outreach? That's how Proteus was born.
Can you give me a sense of the science that can be achieved when you're underwater?
Being there in person, you get a much better sense of
a habitat under the ocean off the coast of Curacao in the Caribbean Sea.
I truly believe by building the most advanced research station based at the bottom of the sea, it can offer the world some invaluable insight from hydrocarbon pollution and microplastics to biodiversity to biomechanics. It really is the missing tool in the toolbox of ocean exploration. We have some amazing partners to help us map not only the Proteus site, but also the entire marine park. We have Carmabi, who are the local NGO here who are taking care of the marine park.
Project Proteus is, I think, for Curacao, very important because it's unique in the world. It's unique in the world. I mean, as simple as that. And that's the type of project we need on Curacao.
There's Map the Gaps.
For us, it's a great opportunity to not just collaborate with leading scientists and explorers, but also give back some knowledge of the seafloor to the people of Curacao.
And we have R2 Sonic with their technology who are helping us get a better understanding of the bottom and have a comprehensive map for ourselves and for the people of Curacao.
It's about building networks and building connections and increasing our knowledge of the oceans, and we're happy to contribute to that.
We're going into a place that is largely unknown. So the opportunities there are so deep, so wide. What will we stand to lose by not knowing more about the ocean world? So one of the biggest imperatives is that we begin to combine that innovative technology along with sustainability as a narrative, so that we can have a great impact on protecting our ocean. And maybe the most important thing goes back to the basics. Something my grandfather used to say when I was a little child, which is people protect what they love what they understand, and they understand what they're taught. I would say that our biggest challenge here for mapping the ocean isn't finances necessarily. It's more of a PR problem. Nay, it's actually, like many other ocean accomplishments, it's a storytelling challenge. Because if you look at what space has done, we need to do better. For the ocean, for our life support system, for the future generations to be able to take back what we've taken for granted. And so science and conservation without a voice is hugely inefficient. We must impassion that public at large in order to generate that widespread investment for the ocean exploration and conservation at a scale conducive to a future for humanity. So with that, thank you very much.
Thank you, Fabian, for those wonderful words. And now over to Ariane.
Thank you. It's on here. Oh, there you go. Hey everyone, it's an honor to be here, honestly. A few years ago, I wanted to be a paleontologist, so studying dinosaurs, whatnot, and I actually joined during COVID, I think this was the 2021-2022 Map the Gap Symposium. And since then, I've changed my degree, and this is what I'm doing. And it's got me to Monaco, so I'm very honored to be here. So thank you to Seabed 2030, Map the Gaps, and everybody involved for getting me out here and putting me on such a lovely platform. So I study at Imperial College London. I'm a third-year Earth and Planetary Scientist there at the Royal School of Mines, as pictured. Most beautiful building on campus, ask anybody. And I'm looking to specialize in marine geophysics for my master's thesis next year. And I've really been passionate about mapping the seafloor, as I said, for quite a few years now, before university. And I'm just so glad that I'm in this space. And since I've joined university, I've looked at multiple types of data, whether it's focal mechanisms, seismic data in dunes, sand dunes in Cyprus, in our field trips, whether it's at sea, and also seismographs. The one in the bottom right is a seismograph network that could show you the earthquake propagation of the 2004 tsunami. It went around the world 4 times. It was that powerful. So I understand the data. I understand why it's important, the analysis element of it, but I was always so confused as to how is it collected, especially with marine data. It feels like the seas are against us. There's so many elements out there that we need to overcome, whether it's you're a surface vehicle, whether you're an AUV, it's lots of different challenges. And I thought, you know, what can I do as an undergraduate? I don't want to wait too long. What can I do as an undergraduate to help people see the oceans in a much better light? I found that people were quite space oriented, which is no faults of their own, of course, but I wanted to bring more positive change, positive attitudes towards the seas, because some people have negative connotations of it. Some people don't really care. But as Fabian said, you know, we need to enlighten the world, show them the true beauty behind it. And so I wanted to build something that could be an engine of change. And, you know, being at Imperial, being at the tech center of London and arguably the UK, you see all these technological innovations. You're surrounded by people from robotics, mechanical engineering, whatever it is. And you see that there is room for disruption in this market. There is such a large market to introduce robotics, AI, all these different elements to the world, and for ocean mapping, ocean floor mapping. It's kind of hard to acquire data at sea, in my opinion, without the use of robotics. There's such an extraordinary tool to enable us to do that. And so how could we reduce the barriers for adoption? So I set out with my team. My co-founder, Andy, is in the audience there, and my team are back home in London building our second proof of concept. And we're actively researching the use of hydrogen fuel cells, so clean, zero emissions. It's supposedly long endurance technology. We're exploring this in AUVs, so underwater environments. Can we propel vehicles for extended endurance and current battery operated or diesel operated vehicles? Does it provide a wealth more of benefits in terms of the environmental aspects as well? These are the kind of questions that we're exploring, and we're so honored to do so. That's a mock-up of one of our vehicles. We've won a few awards here and there, and yeah, we're really honored to be working on a topic like this. We've got so much support around us, and yeah, it really is fantastic. So what I like to think about is, what is my future of ocean exploration? I'm relatively younger than the audience here. I'm probably the only student at this conference. And I like to think that ocean activities in the future are a lot more sustainable, so they're cleaner, such as with hydrogen technology, zero emissions or near zero. And they're also sustained. Vessels that can go out to sea for much longer endurance than the current ones, they're the ones that we can, put our faith, put our reliance in to carry out certain activities without hopefully the need for motherships and associated vessels on the shore, maybe even crew members, so cutting down the operational expenditure by a large amount. And even field knowledge gaps. People aren't aware of the benefits of the oceans. People aren't aware of why it's so amazing. People see movies like Jaws and think, that's it, I'm never swimming in the seas again. Case closed, book closed, done and dusted. But really, it's not like that. Honestly, I used to think like that before. I used to be so scared. And then my world got opened up to this whole beautiful thing. Like, I'm literally in Monaco right now. Yeah. And then touching on crowdsourced bathymetry as well, I know a few people have mentioned it, and tomorrow is highlighting it in greater detail and greater terms. But when people are involved in projects, And in practically applying things, that's when they learn the most. Sure, we can show them as much content as we like, but getting them to actually be involved, getting them maybe incentivizing it, maybe there's a reward scheme or a new type of currency we need to come up with for whether, you're an AUV company working with cruise ships to relay the data, or you're attaching them to yachts, as Norma will be talking about. Whatever it is, getting people involved is so worth it, and I think would derive so much more benefit from such activities. And finally, what contributes to this human ocean balance, I like to think about the hob, if you will, is technological acceleration without conflict. We've seen that so many things that we use today that we take advantage of, like multi-beam, single beam, they were accelerated during maybe World War II and other conflicts, but why can't we do that without the need for conflict? We can still change the world and still have a dramatic positive impact without the need to fight or to need, let's improve our competitive advantage for so-and-so reason. Let's do it for the benefit of the planet, for the benefit of science, and to get everybody involved in it as well. And touching on something quite close to my heart is getting people involved, whether they're from NGOs, charities, if the slides work, and non-profits, because for NGOs such as Coastal Impact in India, they're working on coral reef restoration in the Goan archipelago. We've spoken to them many times, for instance, and honestly, they have the most knowledge on the area that they're looking at, so that they're practically local, and leveraging their knowledge, their expertise, and having their voice heard as well within ocean floor mapping is so key. Because so as a student and a founder, you naturally have chats out of curiosity with many, many people, and I think technologies such as hydrogen, which is something that we're exploring, it should be brought to absolutely everybody. I think to let and to enable people such as NGOs, charities, nonprofits to do what they're doing, to continually do what they're doing and champion that field, we want to enable them with those technologies and make sure that they actually have access to it. It shouldn't be the case that they can't afford it, hence they can't use it. And these technologies, they're fantastic for defense purposes, et cetera, but let's democratize it to a certain extent so that people can have access, they can use it for the right reasons, and there's no real barrier to how far we explore the oceans. Everybody should be involved and be exploring the oceans to some degree. And something that I want everybody to remember is the fact that we have over 3 billion livelihoods that depend on the health of the ocean, sustainable activities within it, and whether it's trade, commerce, whether it's aquaculture, fishing, communications, people depend on the seas. We can sit here in our suits and talk about it, but there are people who depend on it every single day, and we cannot forget about those people. If we stop doing what we're doing, all of us together in this room, out there in the world, whether you're on the live stream or not, then these are people that we're letting down. We've got to ensure that we keep the world together, strong, and solve these problems as one. So I do want to say a massive thank you to everybody in this space for really inspiring people like myself as a student to show me that this is the way the world can be. It can be clean, it can be sustainable, it can be so beautiful. And I'm standing here in this room in Monaco where things in the past, history has been made. The amount of people that have contributed to this space are sitting in this room and have been for the past God knows how many years. And I'm really honored to be here. So I just want to say thank you to absolutely everybody for inspiring me. And yeah, thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Aryan. I just met Aryan last Thursday, but I've learned so much from him already. Sarah, over to you, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sarah Cardigos. I'm an oceanographer and more recently also an ocean mapper when I finished the JEPCO training program in 2022. And this very long story, but very also short story, starts when Captain Nilton Sanchez invited someone in the JEPCO community to join a survey in the Galapagos. And I was lucky enough to be finishing my JEPCO program and could do it as my lab visit. So I was very fortunate to be able to accept his challenge. And So here I went to the Galapagos with the Ecuadorian Navy to do this amazing survey. The Galapagos, contrary to my hometown, the Azores in Portugal, only have 3 islands that have a population. They're mostly protected, very undisturbed, which creates this very special and unique environment where animals are relaxed and very beautiful. And I question myself, should we even be mapping such a beautiful and pristine area? Yes, of course we do need to, because of all the reasons it was mentioned today, but also because unfortunately the Galapagos are facing a lot of fishing threats nowadays, so vigilancy is necessary. And this was what the US Coast Guard, James, was doing there in 2022 when it damaged a propeller by going through a not so well or a very poorly mapped area. And this could have been an even bigger problem for the environment there if there would have been any oil spills. There weren't, happily, but they could have. So we don't want to jeopardize all the efforts there is in the Galapagos nowadays to protect it. However, my mission was not about navigation charting. It was about, personally, to assist the Ecuadorian efforts to define their continental shelves, so collect bathymetry data, and also from my even more personal goals were to exchange knowledge with the experienced team of INOCAR. And if I could, and yes, it did happen, also help to train the new hydrographers there and to map this not mapped area in the northern of the Galapagos called the Colin Ridge. So it was a whole month survey where 7 days were to transit there, 15 days to actually survey, and 7 other days to come back. So I quickly understood that we were not mapping while we were transiting, and after being in the pressure drop for 2 months, and also working for CVET 2030, I know the benefits of doing this by exceeding the goals of a mission, and also, well, of course, to contribute to the world seafloor mapping. This is all very clear to us, but in this case, it was not possible to transit map because of the very high temperatures and high humidity we find in low latitudes, and mixed with a very old sonar. The goal was to preserve the sonar system, to get to the survey area, do the mission, and succeed. And this is what happened, happily, of course. However, we never think about that not all the countries actually can transit map, because not all the countries have the resources to do it. So on the way back, I asked again, so now we've done the mission, we can just plug in and collect data. But at the same time, it was also not possible because this very sensitive sonar needed oversight, and the workers, the hydrographers there had also other tasks besides mapping, which was their normal duties on the ship. So this was just cause human exhaustion, and I think this is things that sometimes we don't think about. And this was the main learning experience I got while I was on board of Bay Orion. So in the future, if you want to join this team like I did for a month, there will be new opportunities to come. So be aware, and Map the Gaps makes these opportunities happen by creating this international network that's always in contact through their amazing social media, etc. So thank you so much to Map the Gaps to enable me to be here today to present you these results. And thank you also to all the people on this slide for helping me get to the Galapagos. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Sarah. That was great. And I think a good demonstration on the question this morning from ROI on the JEPCO training program, evidenced in that presentation. So over now to Helen Stewart.
Thank you, everyone. I would like to send special thank you to the members of the IHO, Secretariat, to GEBCO, to Map the Gaps, and the Oceanographic Museum for inviting me here. It is a huge honor and I deeply appreciate it. As David said, my name is Helen Stewart. I am a hydrographer working for Fugro in Houston, and I'm going to talk about courage. Courage that we talk about every day comes in 4 typical forms. There is moral courage, where we look at something that we know it's wrong and we are going to do what's right. We have disciplined courage, where we have a massive challenge that we need to do and we put forth the effort to make it happen every day. I am a long distance endurance cyclist. Last summer, I rode a bicycle from Toronto to Montreal. You don't get on a bike one day and decide you're going to do that. It's months of training and dedication. That's what disciplined courage looks like in the real world. Intellectual courage is what brought a lot of us here today. We are here because we have an absolutely extraordinary task that we are trying to do, and it's going to take us breaking out of old ways of thinking and into different things that we can do in order to meet that goal. We are going to discover things about ourselves along the way. We are going to discover things about the ocean, about how to talk to other people about what we are doing and why. And it all takes, again, acts of everyday courage to be able to do that, to be able to say, this is what we believed 40 years ago, here's what we now know, and it's different and why. And finally, there's empathetic courage. And empathetic courage, if you want to go back to a sports analogy, is that I came in second in the bicycle race, and of course I'm extremely disappointed, but I am thrilled for the person who just came in first. So empathetic courage is the ability to put the thoughts of other people and the experiences, more importantly, of other people ahead of our own experiences and be happy for them. And also, and this is critical to what I'm going to be talking about, if there's something wrong, that we use our empathetic courage to support our moral courage and fix it. And to that note, I'm going to be telling some stories about exceptionally courageous ocean scientists, and I'm also going to be asking everyone here some questions. And I don't expect answers to those questions. Those are for you and for you to think about. And then later in your own time, after you've thought about them, go back and talk with other people and think, what can we do and what can we do better? So on we go. Story number 1, our first explorer combined a knowledge of geology with that of cartography and CAD drafting, and laboriously and painstakingly took sounding traces back in the bad old days when they were still on paper and compiled them into a single large document. And what she found was, where they expected to find a mountain, she found a valley. And took that to her supervisor and said, you need to have a look at this. And the supervisor said, and I quote, "This is girl talk. And also, it cannot be, this looks too much like continental drift." Well, flash forward a year later with some additional evidence, this person took her work and a bit of his own and published it all under his name. And it wasn't until 20 years later that we actually found out about this woman's absolutely colossal contribution to ocean mapping. And in case you have not yet guessed who I'm talking about, it's Marie Tharp. I cannot imagine working with the profound levels of disrespect that it takes to belittle my work because of my gender. And that is what "this is girl talk" means. And I can't imagine working under the kind of profound disrespect that it takes to take somebody else's absolutely transformative work and publish it under their own name. And so it's very easy for us to sit here and think, wow, look at what Marie Tharp did, and she put up with all that, is so brave. And why are we calling her brave? Why aren't we saying we need to do better, having that moral courage and empathetic courage and putting it together and saying, what more could we have? How many more exceptionally talented women could we have if we were not belittling them or disrespecting them because of something that we can't change? We're born with it. So that's question number 1. Story number 2, Again, somebody who was born in the United States, this time in the state of Virginia, which at the time when she was born was still legally segregated. She went to a Black-only school. She went to a Black-only university. And when she got out into the working world, she heard about a new job opportunity at what's now called the U.S. Naval Weapons Center in Dahlgren and applied for a job, was offered an interview which she turned down partially because she was concerned of being dismissed out of hand about her race, but partially because there were no transportation options because of legal segregation. She could not take a bus from where she was until where she needed to be, and she declined the interview. And the US Navy later called her up and offered her the job sight unseen. She worked there for about 40 years. And in her distinguished tenure, she went from being one of only 4 African Americans at the entire Naval Weapons Center to leading her own laboratory. And I would like you to meet Gladys West. If I could go back in time and meet somebody, I want to meet her. Because of Gladys West, we have GPS. We have satellite radar oceanography, which means anybody who has ever used tidal models based on satellite altimetry, you owe this to her lab. We have the foundations of atmospheric oceanography. We have the geoid of the planet Neptune because of this woman, which has nothing to do with ocean mapping, but it's amazing. And yes, we can say, you know, she overcame all these barriers into her career being a Black woman in the US in the 1960s and 1970s, but how many more people were there like her who never had that one barrier lowered and never was able to get in the door? What would we have lost if we did not have Gladys West? What more could we have if we were able to get more people like her in the door and support them through their career progression upwards, including into senior leadership? Moving on, our next person was born in Austria. She was trained in the academies in Vienna and later opened the first professional kindergarten in Vienna, which also happened to be a training center for refugees from Eastern Europe. They would bring them in there and teach them how to get into the educational profession so they would be able to support themselves as they continued. And as you can see from this map, she didn't stay there. After the Kristallnacht pogrom in 1938, she and her family left Austria, took a train to Italy, went through the Suez Canal, around the Cape of Good Hope, crossed the Atlantic Ocean and settled in Boston, where this religious minority refugee mother of 2 worked as a seamstress's assistant to support her family and feed herself until her youngest child was old enough to go back to school or into school, after which point she went back into the paid workforce full-time. And my esteemed colleagues, meet Dr. Irene Fisher. Among other things, Irene Fisher independently recalculated the oblateness of the Earth. She was told in no uncertain terms to not use her calculations because they were wrong. She kept her calculations, and when the Sputnik and Mercury missions went up, they actually confirmed what they did. So there's that intellectual courage in action. And anybody who has ever used the WGS-84 geodetic datum for anything, here you go, there's your founding mother. And what do we have because a refugee did not have doors slammed in her face? What do we have because she did not have barriers to her employment and being able to join the workforce because of where she was from? And oh, by the way, what do we have because the fact that she was a mother was not immediately considered enough to eliminate her from the geospatial workforce? And again, going back to, we hear stories about the motherhood penalty and mothers as barriers, and look how brave she was to overcome these goals. That's true, but why couldn't we be brave enough to remove those barriers in the first place? If the only thing the person had heard when he hired her was religious minority refugee mother of two and not exquisitely trained professional who took a career break for extremely good reasons, we would have lost out, and that would have been a shame. Moving on, one of the more devastating losses that we have because of colonialism is the loss of indigenous knowledge. And especially in cases where the indigenous population was not all that large to begin with, as the elders were no longer able to pass the knowledge on, and as they died out, we lost vast swaths of information. Our next ocean explorer realized this as a young woman, and she made it her life's work to interview Native Hawaiian elders, to record what they were doing, to listen to the oral tradition and preserve that knowledge before it was gone. And that's Dr. Isabella Aiona Abbott. She was the first Indigenous Hawaiian person ever to get a PhD in scientific disciplines. And as you can see from her print marks there, she specialized in seaweeds. During her career, she founded the ethnobotany program at Stanford University in California. Ethnobotany combines anthropology with botany and what the two of them together can achieve. And over the course of her career, she cataloged over 200 species of seaweeds just in the Hawaiian Islands alone. And then, as you can see from the picture, other traditional plants used for food, clothing, dye, medicine, building materials, sacred purposes, just because they smelled good and people liked them, all of that. And why this comes into effect and how that need to preserve indigenous knowledge is so vital. One of the seaweeds that she cataloged is called limokoho. In Hawaiian, it means bitter seaweed. It's something that people eat. But also it turns out that if you feed it to beef and dairy cattle, it reduces the amount of methane that they emit from their digestion somewhere between 30 and 80%, which is profound. So the ties of ethnobotany here could make a massive difference in terms of being able to mitigate climate change and still be able to eat affordable protein food. So again, talking about courage, she had the courage to preserve her indigenous losses and indigenous knowledge before it was lost. We need to step up as a global ocean scientific community and learn how to meaningfully and tactfully engage with indigenous cultures and learn their traditional knowledge, because it is that critical in terms of science going forward into the future. Next up, this man is an Afro-Caribbean man who was born in Belize back when it was the colony of British Honduras. There were no educational opportunities outside of high school in Belize at the time, so he went first to Jamaica for his undergraduate degree. He went to the University of California for his doctorate, then went to do postdoctoral studies at Oxford, and finally went back to California to be a professor. He studied photosynthetic algae and phytoplankton that live symbiotically with corals. If you have ever heard of zooanthely, or you have ever heard of coral bleaching, you are familiar with this man's work. As an African Caribbean man in California in the 1960s, he was frequently harassed on the way to campus by police telling him, "You don't belong here." At one point when he was at Oxford, he was being groomed to take over the Discovery Bay Marine Laboratory in Jamaica as its next director. And then unfortunately, the person he was working for died very suddenly, and rather than give it to him, it was given to a white British man. During his career, he was frequently not awarded grant funding because what he was doing was too new or too interdisciplinary, while he watched his white colleagues get grant funding in similar disciplines. And his name was Dr. Robert Trench. And again, it's really easy to say he still became the professor at Stanford. He still had this glittering, storied career. But why did he have to face all those barriers in order to get there? Why did he have to get harassed on campus because of what he looked like? Why did he get passed over for promotion because somebody in charge decided that he didn't look the right way? Never mind his skills or what he was doing, but he didn't look the right way. And it angered him and frustrated him to the point that he actually took early retirement. So how many poor people do we have who are like Robert Trench, who get fed up and quit? They realize they're never going to go any further. They realize they're never, ever going to achieve what they want to. And they decide, I have other things that I can do with my time. And that, for our global profession, that is a massive loss. This guy's research was absolutely transformative. Why couldn't we treat him that way? The last story is different from all the others in that first, that this is a person that I know personally. We met back in 2007, and also that he's not an ocean scientist. And if you call having degrees or writing papers as your criteria, he's not a scientist at all. He was a tour guide at the West Coast Fossil Park, just north of Cape Town in South Africa. And he was really, 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 really good at his job. It takes a lot of skill to be able to simultaneously engage 6-year-olds and 60-year-olds, keep them all from wandering off into an open pit dig, to keep them entertained. He would put us in front of something and challenge us to actually stand there and think and look at the fossils in front of you and say, what is going on here? How old is this animal? Can you tell me if this belongs to a juvenile or to an adult animal? And then he led us through the rest of the digs, keeping us challenged along the way. And he did all of this with absolutely zero post-secondary education at all. And if any of you are wondering, should you ever be looking at the skull of a juvenile short-necked giraffe, as it turns out, juvenile short-necked giraffes get baby teeth and adult teeth, and they lose their baby teeth too. So that's how you look at it and know, is this a juvenile or is it an adult? And this man's name was Nicky. And Nicky, when we met him, was probably close to 60 years old. And that means that, and he was also a Cape colored man. For those of you who are not South African, that's an ethnic group in the Western, that are mostly found in the Western Cape province of South Africa. And so because he was not, his skin was not the right color, and he was too old to have really gone to university after the government changed over in the 1990s, he never had the opportunities that we do now. He on paper had some opportunities for higher education, but in practice, not really. And in spite of his obvious knowledge and his obvious passion for paleontology, he obviously really liked what he did. He was legally barred from having that opportunity. And I'm not bringing him up to compare anything that's going on right now to what happened in South Africa in the 1980s. That's not true. But what I do want everybody in here to really think about is that a lot of the policies and systems that we live under right now, who has access to education, who has access to grant funding, who is able to get a visa, whose work is in their first language, those are all policies that were determined decades ago by people who were most likely dead, and they still exist as legacy policies, either because they work for people who are in leadership positions, so why should we change it if it's working, or because the people who they affect the most are brave enough to assess the risks of speaking out and say, I can't afford to leave my family homeless. It takes a lot of courage to know when to stop. And they had that courage of when to stop, but the cost was that the people who were in leadership positions, even with all the best intentions in the world, don't know what they don't know. They know it's working for me, but they don't know that it's not working for her or him or this whole group. And I say this with quite a bit of self-awareness and a lot of thought. I am a well-educated, able-bodied white woman from the United States whose first language is English The convention that scientific literature is published in English was made well before I was born, and it's not changed any time since. But I do recognize that for my colleagues who have had to learn another language or multiple other languages in order to do this, this comes at a cost. It comes at a cost for people who would need a visa to travel here. And so thank you, Map the Gaps, for making this to something that has a hybrid and virtual presentation that really makes a difference. But for all the rest of us, it's really painful and uncomfortable at times to look at these systems that favor me and go, that's not right, we need to do better. And once again, I want to ask you, what more could we have if we have the intellectual courage, the disciplined courage, the empathetic courage, and especially the moral courage to say, why are we tolerating these barriers? There's no good reason for them. There may have been a reason 60 years ago, but there's no good reason now. And if the people that we want to join our collective and our system of ocean mapping, if they can't get a basic education like Nikki, or they can't go to their job without being harassed like Dr. Trench, or they can't find anyone to speak their language like Dr. Iona Abbott, or they are a mother and they want to take a career break to make sure that their children are cared for, or they are not of the dominant race and they face barriers because of it. If we are tolerating this in our system doesn't work, and we need to do better. And it takes a lot of intention. It takes a lot of courage at the institutional level. And to be very honest and realistic, this is going to take decades of work to undo. The GEBCO program is magnificent. That's been around for 20 years. It's going to take a lot more work for the people who in this program that's still fairly new to be able to move into leadership positions themselves, simply because when you first get out of your undergraduate degree, you're not going straight to the top. So closing up, this is something that I absolutely believe y'all means all. And when we all do better, we all do better. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen, for sharing those stories and challenging us. Now over to Colleen to wrap up this session.
Nope. Yep. Hold on. No, that ruined the surprise now. Okay. Well, anyway, so thank you for having me today. I am going to focus on a particular word as it relates to ocean floor exploration, and that, of course, is remote. The beginning of the COVID pandemic really upturned the way that we work on land. And everything is different now, and teleworking has become normalized in the office. But how do we normalize remote operations when it comes to conducting surveys? So as we have the challenge of filling these holes, mapping these gaps, of course we need more ships, to make more data. And I hesitate to use the word ships anymore, because it's not just ships or boats or vessels, it's also vehicles. And so I try to use the word platforms, because you really can put a multi-beam on just about anything, like a kayak or a surfboard these days. So in the interest of being inclusive to vessels of all types, refer to them as platforms. Now we do have, of course, a number of new ships that are coming online. The RCRVs, which will be added to the UNOLS fleet in the US. These are 3 vessels that are going to institutes that do not have mapping programs, so that is an increase in our capability. We are also having 2 new survey ships being built to replace the survey ships in the NOAA fleet. We have 2 oceanographic NOAA ships coming in. I'm particularly excited about those because they'll both have EM-124s, which for the first time the NOAA fleet will have kind of one of everything and be able to map with the widest swath in the deepest parts of the ocean. And many other ships around the world are being added to the fleet. And there's all different kinds of other options here, like Larry Mayer's barge idea. The objective being sticking a mapping system on a barge and towing that around instead of having to deploy an actual vessel that takes, a crew of, say, 20 people. You have on a tug a crew of maybe 12 people or perhaps even fewer. This, of course, would really only be possible if you were able to remotely operate all of the systems on board. I think the biggest challenge here is that as soon as you want to add one system, somebody else wants to add 3 more and more and more and more. And the more complex you make a platform, the more difficult it is to manage. Over the years, of course, the idea of sticking systems on commercial vessels that transit all over the world, all of the time, all of the cargo that we know and love, these computers, our phones, our clothing, all come from overseas via ship. Can we stick systems on those boats? Well, I think that has limited return on investment. It's going to be expensive to install and operate and integrate. And of course, a cargo ship that is transiting the ocean kind of does it on a regular circuit. So there's only so much that you can really offset a track to continue to actually collect new data. Of course, we're in Monaco. We must talk about the yachts. Can we stick a multi-beam on a super yacht? Perhaps. But as Victor was talking about earlier today, what's the incentive? I think it's going to be really hard to convince someone to spend the money on the fuel that it will take to go back and forth and drive some lines. I really doubt somebody's going to want to take the time to do that. However, it's worth considering because yachts go to a lot of exotic locales where there is less data or poorly mapped areas. I think it's probably more likely to further promote the crowdsourced bathymetry aspects with collecting data, as was talked about earlier, from the navigation systems. It's a lot less invasive to the actual operation and management of the vessel. I think a really other interesting perspective would be instead of the mapping system on the super yacht, put the mapping system on the tender. It's probably a lot more likely to be used in a more efficient way. This is an area where you could map poorly charted harbors and ports and anchorages and things. I've yet to see that really take off, but perhaps we need to do more marketing. Thus come the robots. So we're expanding the fleet to collect more data to fill these holes. And really the benefit of these types of vehicles is the scalability. It takes years to build a research vessel. It takes even years to refit a research vessel. And these types of vessels, and I'm not going to go into the details of their operations, but these types of vessels can be built on a much shorter timeline and run at a more cost-effective price point than, say, a research vessel, perhaps. So that is an aspect where we can increase the fleet a little bit more economically. And a lot of organizations have been working on this, and I don't want to go into uncrewed vehicles too much because these are remote by design. These have to be remote because there's nobody on board. So this is not really what I'm talking about. I want to talk about how do we bring remote operations into our daily lives and into the way that we train the workforce. So therein lies the problem. We want more ships, we want more data. Who's going to take care of all that? Who's going to collect it? Who's going to process it? Who's going to manage it? Now, how do we get more people trained? The NOAA Corps Basic Officer Training, for example, is a 17-week program. We don't really, as far as I know, really have anything like that. We have, of course, the multi-beam training course, which is a series of lectures, but where's the hands-on component? We have the JEBCO program. That's obviously a huge success, but I'm talking about how do we get people trained up in a short period of time, a focused time, on how to press the buttons. How do you actually just go sit on a ship and press the buttons to collect data? Do we have to start younger? There are some limited summer camp options, but I think the difficulty here is that you have to live near one of these places or have the money to support your child to go to attend one of these camps. So it's already quite a limited offer to the general public. So talking about better marketing, which came up earlier, I would like to acknowledge we do have, of course, our eco-celebrities in the room, our mapping celebrities and heroes alike. But maybe we need to take this a step further. Maybe we need to get pop culture icons like Leonardo DiCaprio. If you're watching, to join the effort and get some more public attention. Of course, CBID 2030 and Map the Gaps have done an extraordinary effort and have achieved so much in bringing attention to the subject for the public. But maybe a Taylor Swift song, Taylor Swift, are you in the room? Are you listening? Could, perhaps engage the younger audiences that, aren't clued into the Discovery Channel just yet. Action movie, maybe something a little less Zizou, but a little more Discovery Channel, something kind of in between. I don't know, just throwing out ideas here. Netflix has taken away the sharing of accounts, so maybe we just have to say, okay, if you map the ocean, you get a free Netflix account. I don't know. Kongsberg swag, I put some in the back. I think it's mostly gone, but we do what we can. So to talk about what exists now, you have, and I'm focusing on specifically the people that collect the data. There are, of course, as this room and online viewers represent, so many facets of ocean exploration, ocean mapping, that, administrative and logistic and data management, all those things. And I'm not including those in this particular figure. This is specifically the people that collect the data. So we have the, kid on their couch, such as myself, watching a documentary of a 3D fly-through when I was, 12. Oh, that's cool, I wanna do that. No idea how to get there, really had no opportunity to do that. That didn't roll around until much later in my career. I had already found maritime, and it wasn't till later that I found mapping. There are, of course, demonstrations and classroom interactions and the personal connection. I try to go back to my university and my schools whenever I can to give a talk and talk about what I've done and where I've been to try to get people excited about it. On the job training, that's my favorite. That is completely variable, depends on where you work, what objectives your vessel or company have. It can come from so many different directions and levels of experience. It's really hard to measure your level of training on the job. Other than doing a good job, you get a good performance review. I guess nobody fires you. I guess that's the bar. I don't know. Then, of course, academically, you have a number of programs in the US and around the world that provide degrees and certificates, but you kind of have to actually know that that's something you want to do or want to explore to do before going into that. And then you have exposure from other parts of the industry, like, maybe you're not a mapper, you're a geologist or you're an oceanographer, and you get on a vessel and you have to map something in order to determine where you want to put your stuff and do your experiments. So you're not necessarily the mapper, but you are working with them very closely. And of course, and I put this at the end, not to say that you have to start at any particular place and get to any particular place, but sort of the most professional level then would be, having that certification, the Cat A, Cat B certification. So I do want to acknowledge remote work has been going on for a whole long time, about 2 decades. Several vessels have been working with telepresence, and this is really focused on engagement, not operations. So this is getting a remote audience of general public or science community involved in the mission, not actually pressing the buttons. That has followed in recent years with technology development, but is still not the actual focus of the way that they work. Training, of course, has been part of the program, but this is a bit more ad hoc from my observation. This will be more of a mission-based situation on the level of maybe an internship, a student opportunity that may or may not be connected to some other opportunity. Perhaps you learn in the classroom or ashore, and then you go out on the vessel, or vice versa. But in a lot of cases, this is not a full-time program. These internships are pretty hard to come by, pretty competitive. So how do we, make that a regular part of the program? Remote processing is another, I think, important direction to come into to be able to use your people more efficiently. So instead of putting the people on the boat to do the processing, put the data off the boat to do the processing. And a number of companies are working on these solutions. A number of software companies are improving the automated workflows, and commercial companies and the like are developing their own ways of working with those workflows. Remote operation centers have been around for a long time, but in some cases, really just for engagement and monitoring and situational awareness. And we're only really just moving into a world where we have operation centers for the sake of pushing buttons. So here comes a remote survey. And of course, it wouldn't be a Kongsberg representative if I didn't talk about a product, so I'm sorry. But just to show an example, this is a method that one could use to actually conduct a remote survey. So we have our acquisition software called seafloor information systems, and it has a remote module, if you will. And this allows the operator to fully control the system remotely, not through remote desktop. So not connecting through a very painstakingly latent connection, but being able to connect directly over low bandwidth to a system and be able to monitor not only one, but multiple systems in the same interface. So it's a lot less training for people because they just open the software they know and love that they already use on the vessel. Now they can use it on their couch, in their pajamas and fuzzy socks. I have no judgment here. And click the buttons at their leisure, not over a latent connection. So you can monitor the survey, you can see what multiple vessels are doing in one interface, and you can connect, different users at different times. The one thing that this really does is opens up the door to a more dispersed and more diverse workforce. Because not only do you have the ability to place them around the world in different time zones, highly recommend. You get a quality of life for your people that you just don't get offshore. And then you are able to invite people to apply to these positions that may not otherwise be physically able to go on a vessel. And so now you've just totally opened up your pool of applicants. So here we have a career path into that. To me, that's one of the incentives for getting people into this workforce is that they have places to go. You don't have to enter into any particular spot. You don't have to, if you want to exit from offshore work or collecting data, you can go into other fields. You can go into product development. You can go into sales or management, data management, logistics, whatever you like. And so this would, hopefully build out that career path so that people feel like they have different places that they can go with that knowledge and experience. But I think the key here is to think about how we can incorporate the remote capabilities of technology into those training programs. Imagine that summer camp is not on a boat. Imagine it's in a classroom in the middle of the continent, in the middle of your landlocked country. You would be able to connect to a vessel remotely to do that. You would have the potential to reach a whole lot more students than having to put somebody on a vessel. In the sense of a boot camp, I think we're talking something like the multi-beam training course, but bigger, right? Taking those lectures and then expanding them into real-life experience, running surveys for commercial vessels with multi-beams attached to them, helping out yacht crews drive their tenders around and collect data, various different levels here. The company-specific training won't go away. JEBCO is here to stay as a vital part of our program, and so this altogether will give people more opportunities. So thank you very much, and we'll turn it back to David.
Okay, thank you, Colleen. Really great conclusion to this session, which hopefully you enjoyed. I think some very unique perspectives coming together here, ultimately trying to grow our community, right, in an equitable and inclusive way. So we're over time. We started late, but I would like to, I have to ask one question because I couldn't help but notice the statistic that Fabian mentioned, which was 34 billion PR impressions. Wow. So my question to you, we get excited if we get 3,400 impressions. Can you offer some words of wisdom to this community based on your exposure to us now and your experiences on how we can do a better job in telling our story and connecting with the public at large?
It's an excellent question. We're all good at something. A lot of us are good at multiple things. The most important thing is to remember that the vast majority of the world does not speak our language. And so to be able to talk about something in an emotional level rather than a statistical or data-filled level is paramount to reach the general public. At the end of the day, human beings are very much like they were thousands of years ago, and sharing knowledge around a campfire. Imagine trying to engage a 5-year-old or a 15-year-old, especially nowadays with all the distractions we have with our social media content and everything else. Those are really your demographic that will help support what we all are doing. And if we can't reach those people, we're not going to move the dial in any significant way on a global scale. At the end of the day, we're all in the proverbial same boat no matter what we do in life. And in order for us to look at a better horizon and to change the course that we've set for ourselves, we must be able to motivate the general public just as much as we motivate politicians and businessmen, because we're all consumers. We're all consumers of the data. We're all consumers of the products and resources that come out of the sea. It's our natural resource bank account that's going bankrupt. So for that very simple prospect, we didn't have a PR campaign to Mission 31, but we saw it as an opportunity to tell the story. We did 31 short videos in 31 days. We were able to connect kids from around the world and just people from around the world to look at the wonders and mystery of the undersea world, a place that they will never get a chance to see by and large. To look at the boom of a Goliath grouper that is hotter than the surface of the sun in less than a blink of an eye, thanks to technologies like the Edgertronic camera that shoots over 20,000 frames a second. To be able to connect the Weather Channel with why we are talking about weather underwater, while most of the air breathers out there on land are subject to hurricanes and such, and to connect the dots between those two worlds. At the end of the day, this little oasis in space is our life support system, and most people will never get a chance to enjoy it the way we have. And we need to be able to bring that wonder, that mystery, and that passion that everyone in here has committed to their careers to the general public, so that maybe they can have a little taste of why we do what we do. To bring them on a journey virtually, to make them understand that ocean mapping is as important as Waze or Google Maps, and to really understand that ocean health is human health. So that's really about it. It's not a PR campaign. It's about human beings talking to other human beings.
Thank you for that, those words of wisdom, and thank you to all of our panelists for this great session. Thank you, Fabian. Thank you, Arian, Sarah, Colleen, Helen. Round of applause for our panelists. Thank you very much. Great, thanks.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Sam Harper. I'm one of the assistant directors at the IHO, and it is my dubious pleasure to moderate the last session, which of course stands between you and a free supper. So don't let that put you off. We've got 3 great speakers to round us out for day one. In the interest of time, and I desperately want, if we possibly can, to carve out some time for you to ask questions, because these These presentations are going to be fascinating. I'll dispense with biographies. They are on the website, but please do take a look at them because the backgrounds of our speakers are really interesting as well. Our first speaker in the final session of Empowering Explorers is Airlie Pickett of NOAA. Please, Airlie, the floor's yours.
Thank you, Sam. Good afternoon, everyone. First, I'd like to thank Colleen for what seemed to be a personal introduction. A lot of the images that she's shown on her slide have direct relation to my personal life. She mentioned, so there's a picture of NOAA ship Fairweather, which is the next ship that I'll be going to after I finish my master's at UNH. There was also a picture of Drix, which is what I'm doing my master's thesis on. And she also mentioned Botsy, which I don't know if I would recommend for most of the hydrographers that I've met. 19 weeks of push-ups is, while fun, I don't know if I would recommend it. But regardless, thank you, Colleen, that was a great talk. Hi everyone, my name is Airlie Pickett and I work for NOAA, which is something that's been thrown around a lot recently, but I don't think we've actually said what it means or stands for. It's the United States National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. So in the spring of 2023, NOAA's Office of Coast Survey, which is responsible for mapping the coastal waters of the United States, discovered that they had extra sea days, which isn't something that happens often. And while there's always plenty of waters to be mapped, and therefore no shortage of tasking for our hydrographic assets, some of our brighter minds hit upon a different idea. The idea was put forth to use that time to provide students from various institutions across the eastern seaboard of the United States with a real-life ocean mapping experience and introduce them to life at sea. To that end, everything kind of came together and we were able to hold 4 cruises in May, June, and July, with 6 to 7 days scheduled underway for 33 students and academic staff from 3 different institutions on the east coast of the United States. The University of South Florida has a program called COMET, which is the Center for Ocean Mapping and Innovative Technologies. The BEAMS program from the College of Charleston, which is the Benthic Acoustic Mapping and Survey program out in South Carolina, and the Center for Coastal and Ocean Mapping and the Joint Hydrographic Center at the University of New Hampshire, of which I am also a part. The identified platform was the NOAA ship Nancy Foster. She's homeported in Charleston, South Carolina. She has 2 multi-beams, an EM2040 and an EM712, and often serves a dual oceanographic mapping purpose on the east coast of the United States and in the Gulf of Mexico. She's one of our primary dive platforms, actually, as well. The survey area was the Blake Plateau, which is, if you see the map of the US there, or there, as it were, about where that little red dot is, which is just off the coast of South Carolina, about 64 nautical miles southeast of Charleston, South Carolina, actually, between about the 90-meter contour and the 650-meter contour. I apologize, this chart is in fathoms. Yeah, it's in fathoms. We were able to map about 625 square nautical miles throughout the 4 legs of the project in 3 different project areas: the southwest polygon, the southern polygon, a little bit of the northern polygon, and then a foul weather area that we dipped off to for a couple of days. The light blue polygons here are the assigned project areas for these 4 legs. The dark blue polygons are previously mapped areas. The Blake Plateau was a priority area because it's becoming increasingly well known as hosting critical habitat for deepwater coral sponges and other important biological species. So it was a project area for that. Those were some of the reasons that it was identified. So overall, the project was a success. We introduced the kids to life at sea. They learned how to take CTD casts and set up a project in SIS and set up projects in HYPAC. Because of the kind of ad hoc nature of the project, everything came together very quickly. A pretty wide net was cast for gathering students as quickly as possible, which meant that we got a lot of students that were not necessarily in the hydrographic programs in the different universities. So we had marine biologists and geologists, physical oceanographers, marine archaeologists. We had a vast array of different backgrounds, which led to some really interesting networking that happened and allowed all of those people, all of those students, to see how ocean mapping can actually benefit them in their own fields, which was really cool. Like how habitat mapping and backscatter can help in, how backscatter can help with habitat mapping and ecosystem-based management. We also introduced them to NOAA and all of the various career opportunities within the organization, both on ships and out, and off ships. And while we didn't intentionally do this, out of the 28 participating students, so 33 academic students and staff, 28 of which were actual students, 22 of those 28 were female, they were women, with a visiting Argentinian scholar, a visiting Argentinian naval officer as part of the Empowering Women in Hydro program. So that was a kind of an added bonus. In the future, we're actually looking to incorporate this project we're actually looking to have dedicated sea time to this project, incorporated into the actual field season schedule. Hopefully we have a little bit of a longer lead time because the compressed timeline made planning and logistics difficult. We're working to hone in on the right number of days for each leg. We're thinking a little bit longer than 6 to 7 days underway because with transit time, that really compresses the actual amount of mapping that we can get done in the training. And adding on to that, we're trying to figure out the right number of students to watch ratio to keep them interested and engaged the entire time, because as many of us know, standing watch for days on end can get a little bit tedious. And we're also hoping to have training material and potentially a deliverable at the end of, or deliverables at the end of each leg for each student to complete and turn in. And we're hoping to expand this to other schools. Again, there were only 3 schools that we contacted this go around, as they're ones that we have previous relationships with. And we know them to have actual hydrographic programs, but that doesn't mean that they're the only ones that we can actually work with. So I'm hoping to expand it to other schools and potentially a ship on the West Coast as well. Again, the project was a success. This was the first time that NOAA's Office of Coast Survey has actually facilitated such a robust and collaborative training experience with academia. We were able to take students from these 3 different institutions, and although it was just the East Coast, it was still a pretty broad geographic distribution, which meant that they got to all interact with each other and start to form their own scientific and professional networks, which was a really interesting and kind of amazing thing to see. It was also really, really beneficial and interesting for those of us on the other side as well, because meeting these young scientists and figuring out what it was that inspires them, how do we get them excited about ocean mapping? This was a direct communication with 28 students who are in mostly ocean-related majors. And it was a mix of undergraduate students, I apologize. It was a mix of undergraduate students and graduate students, primarily actually undergraduate students with a few graduate students sprinkled in. And if you want to learn more from the student perspective, the students from the University of South Florida, so the COMET program, actually wrote blogs. They can be accessed via these QR codes here. And our visiting Argentinian naval officer, Lieutenant Lucia Catana, wrote a blog as well for the Empowering Women in Hydro program. And last, but certainly not least, I was just the chief scientist for one of the legs, and there was a whole host of other things and other people that came together to actually make this all happen, both in NOAA's Office of Coast Survey and within the universities themselves. So if you're watching, thank you. Were it not for a trick of cosmic timing, Julia Wallace, pictured here in the center, in the very center, very, very center, would actually be here giving this talk, but instead you give me. She would probably have done a better job. So if you're watching, thank you everyone. It was really great to be a part of this project, and it was really exciting to be able to connect with all of these students from all of these wonderful programs. And thank you very much to our hosts and sponsors of this event. It's been great being here.
So I'm just looking to the tech team at the back of the room. Are we ready to go? Okay, I was hoping you'd say that. So our next presenter is joining us virtually, so no pressure here. But are there any questions for Ellie following that talk?
Oh, I alluded to it. So I am a lieutenant in the NOAA Corps. NOAA has a fleet of ships and aircraft, and the NOAA Corps is a commissioned corps of officers that are the deck watch officers for the ships and the pilots for the planes. So I am on the ship side of things, and following the conclusion of my hopeful conclusion of my master's program, I will be reporting to the NOAA Ship Fairweather as the operations officer.
Are there any more from the floor? If not, I've got one whilst we're waiting. Ellie, I was struck, you kind of alluded to it, I think, in your presentation, that engaging in these sorts of activities where you are giving access to early career professionals, that there might be some positive two-way feedback. I wonder whether you could expand on the sort of things that you and the crew might have got from that two-way interaction.
So yeah, oftentimes when we're out in the field doing the ocean mapping, we lose some of the magic of it and all of the things that come together to make a survey happen. And so interacting with all of these students and explaining to them, oh, we take CTD casts because we need it to ray trace all of the soundings and actually correctly identify where on the seafloor, well, where we're pretty sure on the seafloor the sounding actually landed and came back. And we need GNSS in order to figure out where the ship is and then ray trace down through that and how everything connects together in this kind of magical way that it's all tiny little pieces that come together to create one big survey. And once everything is working, it is kind of rote, and you just kind of go about and you do line after line after line, and it can seem a little bit boring, but there's a lot of magic that's happening behind the scenes, and how everything comes together is a really important part of that. And figuring out how to communicate how fascinating that actually is was really interesting. We went through we had a lot of kind of table discussions about how GNSS works, what SIS is actually doing when it's showing us the seafloor. What is it actually measuring to get that line on the seafloor? Figuring out what was interesting to the students was really beneficial, and learning how to connect with them on how to connect with them essentially, and figure out what inspires them, because really that's what we need to do. We need the kids. It's been mentioned earlier, we have a dearth of hydrographers. We desperately need to inspire all of these up-and-coming scientists and figure out how to draw them into our community, our weird little world of ours. And I think it's things like this that get the idea out there, because when I was in school, I had no idea that hydrography was even a thing. I kind of happened upon it by chance, and I don't think we can let fate take its course like that anymore. I think we need to have I think we need to direct it a little bit more. So opportunities like this, I think, are really important. And collecting a broader hydrographic, well, a broader fleet of hydrographers, if you will, and letting them know that it exists. How'd I do? That answer your question? Okay.
Thank you, Ellie.
Of course.
Thanks again, Ellie. So I believe we are now going to our afternoon keynote, he says, fingers crossed. Never worked with technology or children, I'm told, or animals. And it appears to be working. Dawn, this is Monaco calling. Can you hear us?
Loud and clear. Hello.
Brilliant. Okay, without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce our afternoon keynote, Dawn Wright, Chief Scientist of Esri. Dawn, the floor is yours.
Thanks so much. So I was asked to provide some thought leadership and resources around the empowerment of our ocean exploration community. And I think it's right along the lines of what Airlie was just describing. For those of us who are literally mapping those gaps and bringing in, especially the younger generation. Can we go to the next slide, please? But before I do that, I'd like to first send a warm hello and thanks to someone who has certainly empowered my exploration by taking me to Challenger Deep, and that would, of course, be Victor Vescovo, who you heard from this morning. So, Victor, if you are watching, thanks for the Lego penguin. And if we advance one more, a click, please. So, Victor, it's finally built with a few extra touches and just in time for the upcoming holidays. So thanks again, Victor. I think I see you actually on camera there, so that's terrific. And if we could advance, there you are. If we could advance to the next, do another slide click. I want to also give special thanks to my former shipmate, Roxy Wigley, who was the heroic Map the Gaps mapper on that Challenger Deep Yap Trench, Palau Trench Ring of Fire expedition under the auspices of Caladan Oceanic, as you have heard from Victor. Next slide, please. I love that Victor called out the seminal contributions of Heather Stewart. And here is another pitch for Laura Trethewey's new book, The Deepest Map. And I thought it was incredibly important that Laura really told the story also of Cassie Bongiovanni and her tremendous bravery and accomplishments as oftentimes the sole ocean mapper during Victor's 5 Deeps expeditions of 2018 to 2019. And if you have not yet heard of or have not yet read this book, please do not delay. The audio version I found to be just as compelling. And in my view, this book is telling the Seabed 2030 and Map the Gap story for the masses. And in terms of empowering explorers, I feel strongly that this book, as well as click forward, please. Another click, Susan Casey's The Underworld, in which she herself also reads the text in the audio version. These 2 books are 2 great ways to get the general public, private foundations, and policymakers even more behind our efforts. Next slide, please. So we continue to see more and more women at sea and in roles of increasing importance and impact both at sea and on shore. Another great example is to the left here, my Challenger Deep expedition cabin mate, Kate Wawatai, with Victor peeking in there. Kate is from New Zealand. She's Maori, and she was the sole woman on the submersible support team during our leg of the Ring of Fire expedition. She's now regularly piloting the limiting factor submersible in its second life as the Baknawa, and that's the small picture below us, under the auspices of Inkfish expeditions. I think it's important for all of us, but especially young people, to see this and to see people like Airlie as well, to hear about this, to internalize these experiences and accomplishments as things that they can aspire to. It's incredibly empowering. And you can also see to the right the other women who were aboard the pressure drop last July. I mean, all of this, this is, I think, similar to Helen Stewart's remarks in the prior session. So there are 4 of the 7 women who were available to take that particular picture, including Kate, myself, and also Nicole Yamase, who's on the far left of our group, who dove to Challenger Deep in 2021 as the first Pacific Islander. Next slide. Further to the standpoint of empowering explorers, and in our quest to completely map the gaps, we are, of course, now in a period of awakening regarding issues of justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. And in this talk, perhaps similar to some of the discussions in session 2 on mapping programs, and again, as a follow-on to Airlie's excellent talk about student experiences on the Nancy Foster, I want to focus on some additional programs, some of which may also be new to you. So if we could do a click. I'm going to click through several images on this slide, and all of these programs that I'm going to describe focus not just the where and the what, but the who or by whom. So in this first program, this is a program that Nicole and her colleagues have launched. It's called the Madao Project, and it's all about reconnecting Micronesian youth in Hawaii to their navigational heritage. If that is not empowering exploration, I don't know what is. And you can find out more about this program on their Facebook page. Click through, please, to the next image, which is about fair seas for all. This is actually an important research paper that illuminates how work at sea is key to our science, but all too often, transgender and gender diverse scientists faced obstacles and harassment that make field research unnecessarily traumatic. And this paper delves into those issues and poses some excellent solutions and perspectives. Click through to the next picture, please. And I'm sorry that my image is blocking the logo below, but this is a picture from Katie Croft Bell's Ocean Discovery League, their global deep sea capacity assessment team. And it includes research assistants from countries all over the world. I really love this picture. Oh, thank you. We at Esri are so excited to be working with them, and pictured are emerging and empowered explorers from the Cook Islands, the Philippines, the UK, Fiji, the USA, Costa Rica, South Africa, and Morocco. If you click through, please, to the next image. One of the most prominent and effective empowerment programs, in my view, is Black in Marine Science, which literally grew from a single tweet by its founder, Tiara Moore, into a full-fledged nonprofit with a $35 million budget from grants and donors. They're fully staffed now. They have a board of directors. They have nearly a dozen different programs for students, professionals, the public, and they were recently approved as a standalone UN Ocean Decade program. And if you click through to the final image on this slide, there are similar organizations that are emerging, such as Latinx in the marine sciences. There's Black Women in Ecology, Evolution, and Marine Science, or BWEAMS, and many more. There are additional notes for this slide that have more information and notes for you, and I'll be sharing access to this entire slide deck at the end of this talk. But if we can go to the next slide, please. In terms of programs that specifically empower explorers, there are far too many to mention in the time that I have, which is a wonderful problem to have. You know, we could not do this a few years ago, but there's so many things that are going on now. And this includes COBRA, the Crustal Ocean Biosphere Research Accelerator. This is directed by Julie Huber of Woods Hole Oceanographic and Beth Orcutt of Bigelow Laboratory for the Ocean Sciences. Next slide, please. And one of COBRA's new programs is a new training in how to be a good chief scientist at sea. Oh my gosh, oh my goodness, how I wish I had something like this when I was starting out. You know, as many of us know all too well, leading deep sea research expeditions requires a breadth of training and experience and confidence that is difficult for early career researchers to gain. COBRA now has this 2024 Deep Sea Expedition Leadership Master Class that will equip participants with the skills and the tools to successfully design, propose, execute, and report out on deep sea oceanographic field research, and with a collaborative, just, equitable, diverse, and inclusive approach. This is a program that's going to run virtually for 13 weeks next year from 27 February to 21 May. And this is international. COBRA is an international network of networks. So it's seeking participation from both US and international early career researchers. And you can see the definition of an early career researcher on the slide, someone who's 10 years from their terminal degree. And the applications for this program are due tomorrow. So if we go to the next slide, because we are so close to the application deadline, if you are interested in this for yourself or your colleagues, please take a photo of the QR code. You might have to remove my picture there for those who want to take a quick photo and have information about this masterclass and how to sign up. Funded in the same National Science Foundation ExcelNet program as COBRA, and at the same time is this project that I'm very proud to be a part of, which is a network of networks to implement the existing deep ocean observing strategy. And this is also a UN Ocean Decade program. And as you can see on the slide, DEUCE is community driven, it's international. The idea is to strategically align the entire deep ocean observing community toward collective solution-based science. And as it builds these networks, we are also including undergraduate institutions, as well as industry, as well as nonprofits, certainly government ministries across all of the disciplines and communities that are related to the field of deep ocean observing. And by deep ocean, we mean anything below 200 meters. So all of us here, we are in that community. And if we can go to the next slide, please. Very, very important here in terms of empowering explorers is that this project also funds 6 early career researchers, and they are not just participants. They are not just sitting in on things. They are actually co-leading each of our IDEUCE working groups. And this is absolutely key to our success because of their youth and their energy and their perspective and their ideas and their needs. These 6 are also the leading lights of our broad, diverse, inclusive, cross-disciplinary cohort of more than 120 additional ECRs from all around the world, and they're called the doers, Deep Ocean Early Career Researchers. 2/3 of them are from outside of the US. 33 of them are from developing countries, or what we are now beginning to call big ocean states, as opposed to small island developing states. This program includes a lot of collaborative early career mentoring, elevation and promotion of these scholars in our working groups, and pointing them towards funding opportunities, publishing opportunities, leadership at sea, professional development trainings, including in foundational practices such as FAIR data, the findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable data principles that are important on the geospatial, hydrospatial front. And next slide. Within one of our main working groups is this initiative from a recent DEUCE and COBRA Collective Solution Accelerator workshop that's called Deepening the Decade, that seeks to further foster capacity development and early career researcher advancement within all of these UN Ocean Decade programs. And you'll recognize Seabed 2030 there, as Tina Martin played a very large role in that workshop and bringing forward Seabed 2030's perspectives. All of these programs and projects that are focused on the deep ocean for the UN decade. Next slide, please. And in the parlance of the broader UN Ocean Decade, there's also the term ECOP, or Early Career Ocean Professional. ECOPs are a bit more broad of a term because they include the early career researchers, but everyone who is engaged in any kind of professional activity, not just research. So I hope you'll take some time to look at this story map. This was from a terrific UN Ocean Decade ECOP event that ran for a straight 24 hours across all time zones. It was run completely by the early career ocean professionals from all over the world. They passed the baton, so to speak, in terms of Zoom sessions in all of the time zones of the world, and they shared empowering stories about what they are working on, resources or tips to encourage each other, and also some words of wisdom from us older folks too. So all of that has been captured and recorded in this story map with the address that you can see on the screen. Next slide, please. And finally, I want to say a word about an organization that I only became aware of this year, but I'm now completely committed to this organization in terms of their mission and to spreading the word about them. So I'm spreading the word to you. If you've not heard of WINGS World Quest, they're based in New York City. They're the only organization in the world that awards completely unrestricted grants to women explorers of note. So these are women of any race, culture, or age who are actively engaged in fieldwork that investigates questions about how the Earth works, including the seabed, women who have demonstrated the ability to think outside the box and to follow an uncommon path, or have shown the potential to contribute important future advances in sciences as well as the humanities, and who, of course, share a commitment to contributing to WING's education and outreach mission. Now, the grants from WING's World Quest are modest, but the unrestricted nature allows those grants to be used for things such as childcare, care of an elderly parent, pet care, hiring of an additional intern, just about anything that will further empower a woman explorer. So WINGS has many other programs to elevate and build community around visionary women and their pioneering discoveries in science, in exploration, in conservation, and again, including mapping the seabed. So I hope that you'll check them out at the URL that's on the slide. Next slide. Now, oftentimes we hear the expression, we're all in the same boat. But given the dangers and ravages of climate change, of wars, lack of funding, lack of attention and understanding by the public, partisan political divides, and getting our policymakers to prioritize ocean mapping, while also advancing conservation policies that center on equity and justice and more, I find this sentiment by Damien Barr to be much more appropriate. We are not all in the same boat, but we are all in the same storm. And I love the graphic as well. I got it from Dr. Angel White's closing keynote at the 2022 AGUTOS ASLO Ocean Sciences meeting. And I believe her talk is recorded, really worth catching. Next slide, please. At the same time, we are indeed so all in this together as humans, as human beings. And it was Tony Remengesau, the former president of the Republic of Palau, who pointed out, and Tony dove, President Remengesau dove with Victor to the bottom of the Palau Trench. He has pointed out that we really need to be of the mindset of rowing in one direction. Albeit we're in our different boats, but we're rowing in one direction in harmony toward the answers and solutions for all of these challenges that we face. And of course, we know that the work that we do is complicated. It's wide-ranging in location and technologies and organizations. And we as human beings, we're diverse, but we need everyone's shoulders at the wheel to build a longer table for all instead of higher fences. So this, in my view, is how we ultimately empower explorers. And to the final slide, please. So in addition to the other programs that you've heard about in prior sessions from the other speakers, I hope that these reflections bring additional value to your discussions there in Monaco throughout the rest of the Map the Gaps Symposium. And you can get the slides that you've just seen along with the additional notes at the URL that's on the screen. And you can reach me further at these touch points. And I thank you very much, especially for accommodating me from California. I could not get there to Monaco. So thank you very much.
Dawn, thank you so much. You really got people thinking here. And I would like to pause and see if there are any questions for Dawn from the floor. Nothing from the floor. I think there was so much there, Dawn, in trying to sum it up. I think that's...
Then silence, please.
But actually, what we will do is... there is a question there. Could we get a roving mic to Geoffroy? You're not getting away without a question, Dawn, I'm afraid.
Hi, Kia ora, Dawn. It's Geoffroy Lamarche. I'm not sure you remember me, but nice to see you on the screen there.
Wonderful, Geoffroy.
I really like your talk and all those initiatives. I wonder whether you put some thought, because there's one thing that's been missing a bit through all those talks, is that regardless of what all those initiatives, amazing, you know, it's oozing energy and innovations and keenness everywhere, but at the end of the day, some of the barriers that we're going to have to jump are going to be regulatory and legislative. And there is a need here as well to train the early career researcher these years and also at the science policy interface, which is often a bit of a swear word in our world as soon as you put the word policy. But if we don't put those young people early enough at the science policy interface, then they often end up stopped in their keenness by, unfortunately, some barrier that we all have, whether they are in the EEZ for regional or individual governments or even at the UN level. So have you thought about that, or can you comment on that?
Yes, this is a crucial point. And in both of the National Science Foundation programs that I talked about, COBRA and IDUCE, there is training for in that science policy interface area. And the training and activities there's a range there, all the way from how to effectively speak to your legislator or congressman, or participating in hearings, particularly on the deep sea mining front. Several of the colleagues from both of those projects have been at the International Seabed Authority meetings. The early career researchers have been involved in that to see how that process works. There is training in how do you write an opinion page, an opinion op-ed? How do you communicate on podcasts? How do you communicate with journalists? What are the steps to take to reach the IPCC? And also even at the UN Ocean Decades executive levels. There's a lot of activities that are being coordinated for the UN Ocean Decade Conference in Barcelona next year that are directed specifically towards engaging in this science to policy interface. And I'm actually on the science to policy working group that is part of IDUCE, that is co-led by an early career researcher. As I mentioned, all of the working groups are co-led by these early career researchers so that they can be trained up in the way that they should go, so to speak, or also to train us, to help us who are older to see the important perspective of youth. Yeah, that is all being covered. There are also quite a few science communication programs that are that have actually strengthened in the United States over the last 4 years, especially with the challenges of the prior administration in the US. And so that has caused many of us to redouble our efforts in this area. So thank you very much for bringing up that important point. And of course, there's more that we could do, and we could do it better, but there are many activities along those lines that I'm involved in, and that these programs are putting forward.
Thank you, Dawn. And one final round of applause for Dawn. And it's now my pleasure to invite our final speaker of the first day of this year's Map the Gaps, Monsieur Olivier Vendin, Vice President and Chief Executive Officer of the Prince Albert II of Monaco Foundation. Please, Monsieur Vendin, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me. So I was not expecting to be the last speaker. I know this is very humbling and challenging. So humbling for one big thing. I am not a scientist, and the Prince Albert II of Monaco Foundation is not a scientific research center. Now, that being said, I'm very pleased to be here. We do play a key role, I think, and I believe more and more I listen to the conference today, that we have a pivotal role to play. So Prince Albert II of Monaco Foundation was established 17 years ago by the sovereign prince of the Principality. This is very unique in the world. We are the only NGO that is chaired by a running head of state, which means, yes, indeed, as a traditional philanthropy, we do support and operate projects on the ground in the field of science, awareness, impact, sustainability. This is clear. But we also, in parallel, lead a very strong advocacy, lobbying, and campaigning action. And this is what makes us so special. We have 17 years of track record, a strong credibility, legitimacy in the ocean, namely for the history of the Principality, and this beautiful, beautiful museum is probably the best symbol of that long history. The princes of Monaco have always been at the forefront of that combat. The government of Monaco has been pretty active, and us as a foundation, we have been extremely adamant in our support to push the stakeholders in the right direction when it comes to ocean conservation. As I said, projects on the ground, that's already 800 projects that have been supported, 100 million invested so far, so you understand it. We are a small foundation, but our key role is not the money behind the projects, it's more the policy aspect. And it has been said earlier on, but the core activity of the foundation is clearly, of course, to support science. We are strong believer in science evidence and data, but science is not enough. We must help to push science to policy, put science into motion. We are, in a way, catalyst. I totally assume that term, but we are also a translator. We help to translate the ocean, specifically ocean, but the scientists' knowledge and language for policymakers, for CEOs, and for the civil society. So bringing science to policy, I can give you some examples of that successes throughout the years. The IPCC special report on the ocean and cryosphere, for instance, that has been a request from Prince Albert and Monaco. We are financial supporter of the IUCN Red List. We pushed very hard to have a dedicated SDG 14, so a special SDG for the ocean. We have also been strong advocate to have a better understanding of the connection between climate, ocean, and biodiversity, to push the question of the nexus. And support to research is very important indeed, as I said, but absolutely not enough. Why that? And I have to be very blunt maybe there, but it's been roughly 60 years that scientists have warned the planet, have warned humanity, were a bit scary in their data and knowledge, and it didn't work. Nothing has seriously changed so far. Over the last 15 years, it was more a phase of moralization. we should do this, we have to do that, otherwise it will be a failure. Nothing has seriously changed so far. And so at the end of the day, what remains is probably the universal language of making money, investing, creating jobs, profits. That is probably the common denominator of a lot of states, companies, and around the world. The best example of that situation is, and you quoted it earlier on, Don't Look Up. This included Leonardo DiCaprio, who was mentioned earlier on. So even a documentary, a movie backed by A-listers from Hollywood like DiCaprio, being spot on the message, spot on the dangerosity of the inaction that the world is facing now, didn't reach the audience. Can you raise your hand if you watched Don't Look Up? Okay, we are very much like-minded people in this room. But that's not the majority of the planet. A lot of people are not even aware of that amazing movie with DiCaprio. So we decided at the foundation to shift from traditional philanthropy, which is supporting projects on the ground, supporting science, to impact investment. The driver for Prince Albert and the foundation is clearly making impact. It can be through philanthropy, but we believe more and more it is through investing, bringing to the table the big stakeholders from the private sector, the top guys in finance, the insurance companies that can leverage significantly by accepting a loan, by accepting an insurance policy or refusing it to companies. And I'm telling this with precise thing in mind, deep sea mining. If banks, like a lot of have already pledged to do that, refuse to loan companies for their deep sea mining activity, then this activity will never be launched. Same thing with the insurance companies. They have a strong power, an immediate power of action to prevent serious damages, to damage more the global ocean. Why did we decide then to go into impact investment? Well, as you know, SDG 14 is the least funded SDG from the UN. Roughly 1% of philanthropy goes to the ocean today. So there is clearly a void of awareness as well on that topic, unfortunately. What we understand as well from the scientists and the experts that we work with, there is a real problem with the lack of open data, open sources when it comes to science. And year after year, a lot of scientists come to us for funding, but they want to do the same research that their predecessors did 5, 2, 3 years before them. So this is back to the silos. We are still working, and probably more and more in silos. Scientists on one side fighting for fundamental funding from states, from NGOs, and foundations like myself. But what a waste of time. If we could only help sharing the information, sharing the data, we will probably move forward quicker. And this is something significant that we have decided to do at the foundation. When we fund research, it has to be open data. Otherwise, you're not funded. So our activity today in terms of blue economy is, of course, continue to support science. As I said, we are strong believers that the scientific data is fundamental, but we want to move in two directions: accelerate and scale up existing innovative solutions. We don't have enough time to think in depth and discover new proof of concepts. We believe that all the solutions are laid on the table. Another proof of that, back to science, the IPCC reports. Yes, they are quite scary. Yes, it's worsening report after report. But if you read carefully these reports, they all include a roadmap of solutions, of things that can be implemented. Still, it's not working. So that's why our two main focuses: accelerate and scale up the existing solutions. And to do that, we have now a very interesting political momentum with the High Seas Treaty, with the Plastic Treaty under negotiations, with the 30 by 30 framework. This was never even conceivable a couple of years ago. It took 20 years to reach finally a political consensus. We're not naive. It's still to be ratified and implemented, but what a step forward and source of optimism. In terms of economic opportunities this time, Things have changed within the last 5 years only, but it's changing quite rapidly. We've launched in March a private equity fund. So this is our last step into impact investment, as I said. And this fund, the study we made behind that is every other year, the pipeline of companies working on the blue economy is doubling, so factor 2 every other year. There is even a factor 7 over the last 5 years when it comes to investment in blue funds. It's barely reaching $1 billion now, but it's a factor 7. So this is a new trend, this is accelerating, and it can be, that's my hope, pushed by this political momentum that can only accelerate things or trend by 2030. So with this fund, we clearly went into another world for a foundation, for an NGO supporting science, but we want to walk the talk. When I say breaking the silos, that's precisely what we do. We involve the scientists on the governing bodies of a private equity fund, which is quite unusual. We want to have impact, but we reverse the storytelling, hoping to achieve greater goals. So instead of telling people, you have to help us, please, begging them for money to save the ocean, protect biodiversity in the ocean, we tell them, join us in this fantastic endeavor, make money with us, support the creation of jobs. Oh, and by the way, cherry on the cake, this will have a positive impact on marine ecosystem. And that can be a game changer in the approach, in the psychology of people, because clearly, and again, when you scare them, it doesn't work. Now, back to the core theme of this conference. This ReOcean Fund is betting on 5 verticals of investment, among which ocean data. It is clearly today with aquaculture, the most promising sector of investment. So this is good news, I think, for you. From drones to AI, there is a massive demand for these new tools to support science, to support decision makers, to support the industry in making the right choices and the right investments. And this brings us some hope. I hope that you would share my point on that, but things are changing, of course, still too slowly, but still moving in the right direction with great news in very specific verticals of investment when it comes to ocean conservation. I will conclude also by telling you, and it has been addressed in the previous speech, we are betting a lot also on leadership. So to bring a new generation of leaders, and again, we know that the World Economic Forum is doing that, Forbes, a lot of institutions are working on that sphere. What we try to do there, again, full coherence. We work in a holistic approach, and we are recruiting scientists, but also activists, sportsmen, artists, designers. They just have to be under 35. They just have to have already achieved significant results when it comes to conservation or sustainability at large. The first cohort gathered in Monaco in July 2023, and it's moving forward big time. They are the one changing the world right now in front of our eyes, and we need to involve them more, I think, in our conversation, in our brainstorming sessions to embark the new generation, but also, and once again, the private sector, together with the scientists. The silos can no longer work. They have proven to be a failure, and we have now means, I believe, to try to have these people work together in a better way and more efficient way. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Fabien. Really interesting insights, not least given that we're in Monaco. So there's the geographical relevance to us at the IHO, but also as a JEBCO community as well. I'm looking to the floor. It would be remiss of us not to take one question. Director Sanapi, have we got a roving mic for Luigi?
So thank you very much, Olivier, for this fascinating excursus that you just given to us. I was impressed by a sentence that you mentioned about the solutions are on the table. So And now there is a question to my mind, because we are living in a special decade, the decade fully dedicated to the ocean. It's the first time that we are living in what we remember in our history about the attention to the ocean. So, do you think that there is it's missing a plan, a strategy, a concrete plan to engage the real stakeholders, the governments, to make a change to the approach to the ocean? Because you have now as foundation a very visionary vision and leadership which is unique in the world, as it was when JEPCO was launched in 1903. And what's the role that the Foundation of Prince Albert II can play in case there is the need of an alternative plan to the one that we are living in this decade? Thank you.
No, sure. The reality, and it's another symbol, but some of you were wearing the SDG pins earlier on. Every time we walk, even in other cities or even international meeting with Prince Albert, so many people come to us and say, oh, that's a funny pin. What is it? LGBTQ? Like, no, that's the SDGs. So the problem of awareness is vast. It's really daunting. It's a bit like the Sisyphus myth. You have to go back every day, get the same list of points to be made, and it's really frustrating. It's really frustrating because it's not only for the general public, it's also when you address people that should know, at least by now, they should know a bit. But it's not working. It's clearly not working. So to your point, yes, we need more science. That's a sad reality, and we should put more means into the ocean than into space research, for instance. That's, I mean, at least in the wording, when you say we put billions and billions to study the possibility to live on Mars, the first reaction that we have, at least at the Foundation, is like, really? That must be a joke. We need to put clearly more means right now into the ocean. That's the bottom line. That's the common sense, I would say. But that's not the reality. So I don't have all the answers, but what we're trying now is, again, as I said, to play with the cards that the majority of decision makers have in hands, and it's money, it's investment, it's jobs, it's economic opportunities. So if you prove to them that investing into artificial intelligence could be super beneficial in terms of interest, in terms of return, then they listen. And I've been doing this roadshow for the fund for almost 9 months now, and every time we reach that point, every time we give very concrete examples of companies that have a good return, then people start listening. Because when you still say, oh, it's the, well, no, that's not true. When you start by saying, do you know that the ocean is the first carbon sink of the planet before the forest? And they're like, really? So that you get their attention there. But when then you prove that they have phenomenal economic returns in the ocean, they really listen to you.
Thank you, David. A question that pops to mind. Several of our of the speakers before have raised the issue on what are the obstacles. You know, talking to this audience, it makes sense. We understand. We want the comprehensive map of the ocean, and it's pretty much supported by everyone part of the United Nations, because it's part of the UN Decade of Ocean Science, so governments are in support of that. Yet, if we want to do a mission, then it's asked up in the system, people don't understand it, and the safest way to answer a question you don't understand is to simply say no or not respond at all. Is there an opportunity for those that are engaging with these to liaise with the governments that are in full support of that, and that on a government level, these requests for can be made government to government, even though it's in support of what can be a scientific operation by a private entity? So is there more opportunity? I mean, would it have helped Victor when he was engaging with Indonesia if Prince Albert II would have made a few phone calls? Perhaps I'm being naive, but it's just, is there an opportunity there?
Well, I can't answer to that question. That's belonging to history now. But we can always try. And this is why I was telling you, this foundation, the one I have the chance to be CEO of, we are a very good catalyst, and we are very good at federating the energies between the decision makers, from the public administration, together with CEO of the private sector. This is the reality of a neutral state, credibility of our leader, and the credibility of the organization. So absolutely, and this is how we work on a daily basis almost, even with the international organizations that are based in Monaco. We are always open to support you all at the scientific level, of course, because even if I said that we are shifting towards more impact investment than philanthropy, we keep and we continue and we will continue to support financially science and projects on the ground. But we are also here, and it's often in a very discreet way, but to campaign, to lobby, to push at the political level, to push the regulation. And I didn't mention that, but thanks to that particular action, we saved the bluefin tuna in the Med, for instance. And that was only because Prince Albert stood up and asked that this species was on the red list of the IUCN, knowing that it would probably fail because there was another strong lobbying from certain countries to impeach that. And it didn't happen, but the media attention got caught. And then the European Union had to monitor better and had the quotas respected. So this is precisely the role we are quite good at playing. So please do phone us, write to us if you need some assistance.
Thank you.
Thank you, Olivier. A really insightful way to finish the first day of Map the Gaps, I believe. So it just leaves me to finish the final session and just to invite one final round of applause for all of the speakers that we've had today. I've been reminded, I can do. Okay. I think the confusion is, in the interest of time, I was given the task of doing a roundup for today, but I'm looking at some very excited and very fulfilled, but also some very tired faces. So I think in the interest of making sure that you can get to the restaurant on time, and Tim is about to explain how to do that, I think we'll dispense with the roundup and do a full one at the end of day 2. There we go. Thank you.
And thank you, Sam, Airly, Olivier, and Don, of course. Some logistics before the end of day 1. The first, I thank you, all of you, for staying awake, most of you, during the day. It was a long day, but it was a great day. We had really fantastic panelists and presenters today, so thank you all for coming and participating. We do need to be out of the museum by 6, which is in less than 15 minutes. So I'll try to go fast, only tell one horrible joke. But we have the meal tonight is at Matza Restaurant, which is at 8 Rue Portier, 11 Rue Portier. I really have no concept of where that is on the map. Maybe. Where is it? No, I know I see it on the map, but I spatially unaware of. It's on the other side of the port. We need to be there. The meal starts at 7. Myself and a few people from my team will be waiting for you when you arrive with your meal ticket. If you did not submit a meal request, now would be a good time to come talk to me. If you did submit a meal request and it is other than sea bream, pasta, or beef, you should also come talk to me. There are 2 vegans in the room and we have accommodations for you. So we will hand out your meal voucher when you arrive at the restaurant I have no idea what the seating arrangement is. My understanding is that they will be pouring wine and beer, maybe. I don't know when we arrive. I'm not really sure, but I think there's no Prosecco, no cocktails ahead of time, right? I think that's the only logistics you need. So we're going to start tomorrow again at 9 a.m. sharp, right here, crowdsourced bathymetry. I personally need to go find a bank machine. I've run out of cash, but it got me thinking about what do shellfish do when they run out of cash? I figured maybe they go to a prawn broker. All right, with that last knee slapper, we'll we'll see you tomorrow, if not at the dinner tonight.
It's gorgeous.